we are in the crush pad warm room, and today we're going to talk a little bit about cap management. Unlike a white wine, which really just ferments the juice without skins, red wine really needs the skins in order to get color, tannin, additional flavor, and aromatics that can make some very complex red wines. If you fermented a red wine without skins, you're going to end up with something very pink, something really approximating a white wine. So when you're fermenting a red wine, what happens is the yeasts basically eat up the sugar, create alcohol, some flavor compounds, but they also create a lot of CO2. And that CO2 tends to push up the skins and seeds that float up to the top of the fermentation. And if you just left them there, what you'll find is that very little of the fermenting wine is in contact with the skins at any one time. So you're going to end up with a very under-extracted wine, almost like a rosé style wine or a very light red wine. If you want more extraction in your wine, it's very important to reintroduce the cap, again the skins and seeds, back into the juice and mix that up. And there are a few different techniques of doing this. The traditional technique for small lot fermentation, and these are very small lots, 1 and 2 barrel lot fermentations, is to use something called a punch down. So when your cap rises up to the top of the juice line, what you do is anywhere from twice a day to up to 6 times a day, you come in with a tool like this, which is it's called a punch down tool. There's lots of different forms. And what you do is you actually physically push the cap back into the wine, mix it up really well. It's typically a 2, 3 to 5 minute operation that you do, again, up to several times a day. And that really starts to help extract some of the color and tannin from the skins. And that's really, it's often used for thicker skin varietals. Actually, it's used for all sorts of varietals, but it tends to do very well with thicker skin varietals where you have a lot of structure in the grapes and you don't want to over-extract the wine. Another popular technique, and one that we're using with increasing frequency, is a submerged cap. And submerged cap basically holds the entire cap down beneath the fermenting juice line so that the grapes are in constant contact with the fermenting wine. The advantage of that is it's sort of like when you put a tea bag in a cup of hot water. If you leave it in there for, let's say, 24 hours, and let's say once a day you mix it up and you go back 24 hours later, you're going to find a lot of extraction. Contrast that to putting a tea bag into the glass for 5 minutes, taking it out, coming back 12 hours later, putting it back in for 5 minutes. Generally, you'll find that the submerged cap approach can be more extractive. It's great for thinner skin varietals such as Zinfandel, which is where it was really pioneered. A lot of people use it for Pinot Noir. We actually do use it for thicker skin varietals as well. You can get, for wines that you want a huge amount of extraction, especially very ripe styles of wines where there's not a huge amount of tannin in the skins, you can use a submerged cap to great effect. One of the challenges we have in using a submerged cap in such a small fermentation is ensuring that there's a constant flow, or there's actually a flow each day of the juice. Because if you just leave a submerged cap by itself, after a couple of days, it's going to be very compressed. And so in a larger fermentation, wineries will often do what's called a rack and return or délestage or a pump over to take the juice from the bottom, take it out of the tank, and then put it back on top of the cap, and that'll help break it up. What we'll do instead is, because we're working in such small ferments, we'll actually take the cap out, the plate that holds the cap down once a day. We'll do a traditional punch down to break up the cap and put the plate back in. The final technique that's used for cap management is called a pump over. Again, in a large winery doing a large fermentations, it's not really feasible to do a punch down or to do a submerged cap. So what they do is they have very large tanks. They take wine from the bottom of that tank and they pump it to the top of the tank, and then use a distributor basically that's like a sprinkler that drops wine back on top of the cap. And the wine basically, as it's going through the cap, it starts to get extraction from the cap as it goes back down to the fermenting wine. It's not really necessarily the most extractive technique. You often have channels that develop in the cap. But for us, we often do pump overs, not by themselves, but in conjunction with a submerged cap. And we often call it a combo model, where we keep the submerged cap in there for most of the day. We'll do the once a day punch down to break up the cap, and then we'll come in also once or twice a day and do a pump over, where we basically move the entire volume of the fermenter, which is primarily for 2 reasons. One is oxygen contact. Yeasts really need oxygen to procreate. So especially in the first half of fermentation, it's very important to get a lot of oxygen in. In a punch down, you can actually get quite a bit of oxygen in just through the mechanics of the punch down operation. In a submerged cap, there's no oxygen getting in, so we bring it in through a pump. Another reason why we do a pump over in a submerged cap is to cool down the fermentation. You don't always need to do it, but often your fermentations get quite warm. It's actually an excellent technique to pump over the entire volume of the fermentation, and it can lower your fermentation temperature by 5 or 10 degrees. But really it's primarily around getting oxygen into that ferment. So your choice of cap management technique is really a function of the style of wine you want to create. If you want to create a very, very highly extracted wine, very, very dense with significant tannins, great color, submerged cap or our combination technique is often a good choice. If you're looking for a more reserved, more traditional style of wine, a punch down is often the right choice. For certain varietals, such as let's say Pinot Noir, it's traditionally a punch down technique to get extraction. Because the skins are so thin in Pinot Noir, you can often get comparable extraction with a punch down as a submerged cap, so there's really no right answer. There are other variables such as whether you use enzymes and the level of heat in your fermentation. That also has a huge impact on your ultimate extraction. So this gets actually to become a tricky issue, a philosophical issue, and something you should always talk about with one of your winemaker consultants.